very first thing to know about me is that I am Catholic, like really, really Catholic, which can be a wonderful thing, nothing necessarily wrong with that, but it influenced everything for me. I mean, when I grew up, I had an uncle who was a Catholic priest. We had nuns in our house all the time, and I went to Catholic grade school, middle school. I went to a Catholic high school seminary. I went to a Catholic university for my undergrad, and I went to a Catholic law school. I mean, I did Catholic, and that background influenced, in part, how willing I was to approach who I was. Now, another piece that influenced all of that is the fact that I grew up in the 60s and 70s. So there was no language. And certainly no frame of reference or a healthy frame of reference. There was nothing. There was absolutely nothing. So for me, you know what, and I fit all the characteristics of the classic boy. I mean, I played sports all throughout grade school. So for me, in some ways, there was nothing to indicate necessarily until probably I was closer to 10 or so, maybe 11 or 12, as I found that I just had this need to be able to wear my sister's clothes. And I had absolutely no concept of what that was about. The only thing I knew was that it was this need, it felt right. But I was also Catholic, and it's the 60s, and I'm ashamed of myself because I'm not supposed to be doing this. I'm supposed to be the classic boy. You know, I am literally a choir boy. I mean, I was an altar boy, I was a choir boy, I read in church, I did all of these things, and none of this was supposed to be occurring. And so I just kind of struggled through needing and shame, and needing and shame. And that was really what formed the course of my life. And it wasn't until I was 15. I was going through all magazines, and on the cover there was one story on the sidebar that read transsexuals, male or female. And I had absolutely no idea what that was about. But there was something about it I knew I needed to read. And so we lived, okay, so this is our Catholic, where we lived in a rectory, ex-rectory. And so my dad had his own bathroom that had no windows, had a lock on the door, so that you could be sealed off from the world. And so I took the Life magazine, and I went up to my dad's bathroom, and I locked the door, and I wouldn't even turn on the light until then, and nobody could get in. And then I started going through the magazine looking for the article. And I reached this point where I got to on the right hand, it was a multi-page article, and on the right hand side was the opening piece that said transsexuals, male or female, and then had this subtitle beneath it. And I started reading that, and then I looked at the left-hand side of the magazine, and it was this full-page photo. And it was a young woman who was somewhere in her early 20s. And I read the caption, and she was a trans woman. Now, of course, that term didn't exist then either. I looked at the photo, and I saw myself. As soon as I saw that she was trans, and I thought, oh my God, God, I'm looking at myself. I knew, even though I had no concept of what was going on for me or why, I knew in looking at that photo that I was seeing myself. And so I thought the same set of words in two different tones. And the words were, oh my God. And in one way it was, oh my God, I see myself. And the other was, oh my God, no, 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 no. Because everything was going to be totally messed up. Everything from that point forward. You know, I'm in a Catholic seminary. I have nobody to talk to. And I had friends, but there was no way that I was going to share that. I had no idea what they would say. I was too ashamed to say. There's nothing to do with the information. And so the only thing that I did at the time was take the magazine and put it back down in the middle of a pile and never looked at it again. And yet that moment stayed with me, so that 35 years later, I knew the year, I knew who was on the cover, I knew what the articles were, I knew that it was the beginning of 1970. But it stayed. And so I kept trying to experience, I always struggle around the term cross-dressing. It's not a term that's not used, but to me it always seems to indicate an act. I'm dressing. And this wasn't about an action. This was about expressing who I was. This was about being. And all I was looking to do was find a way to express who I am. And there was no way to do it. So I told myself that this couldn't be real, that it would go away, that I would just have to stay focused on other things. You know, and I was in college, and I never quite felt that I knew my place. Even in the midst of a dorm, because in Notre Dame you stay in a dorm most of college, but even in the midst of all of these people, I still felt out of place. And honestly, it wasn't, I know I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but it wasn't until right around the time I was transitioning, and I was at this church fair. It was interesting because all of the women were grouped at the bake sale area, and all of the men were at the money. As I was sitting there with the bake sale people, and I was watching the guys, and I thought, I have no concept of what it's like to be a guy. And what that experience and that feeling that I had at Notre Dame, and I loved the school, I always felt out of place. And then sitting at a bake sale, I finally understood why I felt out of place, because I was never me. The whole time I was there, I was never me. And I hung out with the guys. And not that I don't have friends who are male or anything like that, but it wasn't, I was never at home. So I ended up getting married, and I went a long time, thinking that just marriage would take care of things for me. And then I finally hit this point where I just couldn't ignore who I was. And so I started trying to find expression again, and heard about this organization called Trias. There was somebody talking about it on the radio. The segment ended, and I had absolutely no idea how to find them. It took me 2 years to find it. And that whole time, it's like, I need to talk to somebody. I need to find somebody. And went to the first gathering. There was such a combination of feelings. The best feeling was I walked into a space and I thought, oh my God, I'm with my people. I'm with my people. They get me. They know, they've had this experience. I don't have to try to explain to them what this means or what this is like or anything else like that. And at the same time, I struggled. There was held, these meetings were held at a hotel in the western suburbs. And so to attend, you would, I think there was a back door, but I don't think I knew where the back door was initially. And so I have to walk through the lobby of the hotel. And that was terrifying. It was cool in some ways. There's something cool about being in this incredibly limited sense out. And yet, at the same time, what's going through my mind is, oh my God, these people are looking at me, they're clocking me, they're judging me. And I didn't really need anybody else to judge me because I was really busy judging myself. I know that I have carried, I think I've dealt with it, but who knows? My own transphobia, all of those messages about there is something wrong with not conforming and not conforming to what it means to be a guy. I took that in. And so there would be, every time I went to a Tri-S meeting, there was like this nutty battle going on for me. And I would be getting ready and psyched about getting ready. And at the same time, I would be in this other place of, no, I can't do this. I can't do this. I shouldn't do this. I had a sense of myself that I looked like a clown. And there was the actual word I used for myself, was I looked like a clown. And I was quite certain it was phrasing from my mom, who had not seen me, but I could hear it inside my head. And so I would do this whole thing for like an hour or two before going to Tri-S that was, okay, I'm going. No, I'm not. I'm going. No, I'm not. I would start to get changed and then get unchanged and then get changed and then get unchanged and go back and forth. And it was nuts. And to be around that energy had to be enough to make anybody crazy. It certainly was making me crazy. And so I went for like 2 or 3 years, and then I backed off again for multiple reasons. Some good, I had some good reasons for it, and I had, and it gave me an excuse so that I didn't have to be myself because of the consequences. I had a career, I was set, I had a family, all of that was in place. And so I just struggled back and forth. There came this point in the course of doing some work where I couldn't ignore it anymore. And I was with a support group and was doing some work as part of the support group. And I finished the work and I stopped and I said, oh my God, I'm so transgender. And it was the first time I'd ever used the word in relation to myself, even though this was a support group for individuals who are transgender, but I still couldn't say it. And I had been with them for years and I still couldn't say it. And so then the question became, so what do I do with this? what does this mean? Because being trans doesn't necessarily mean that you're transitioning. It doesn't necessarily mean any medical intervention. It doesn't mean socially that there's a shift. The question is always, so what's comfortable for me? What feels like where's the right space for me? And so I took several years to figure that out. And yet one of the things that locked it for me, only a couple years in, and still even having this, I still waited to be certain, was I was doing this panel with some people from one of there are two gender organizations in Chicago, and or Chicagoland area, and we're at a junior college, and so we got to do the Q&A portion of the panel. And one of there was a young woman towards the front, she raised her hand, and she looked at me and she said, I have a question for you. And I said, okay. And she said, so when you die, how do you want to be buried? I said, I don't want to be buried as a guy. I don't. I can't conceive. I have known several people who have died miserable. And I don't want to die that way. And at this point, I'm right around 50. And I couldn't see my life ending like that. All I could think of, and then driving home, all I could think of was being on my deathbed and thinking, oh my God, I never was me. I never became who I needed to become. And the sense of loss, if that would happen, and you don't get do-overs. So that then pushed me towards, okay, I know what I need to do, or who I need to be, but there was still all of this shame around who that meant I would be, and then just downright terror, because I'm established. I'm a lawyer, I have a job with a good firm, I've been there since eternity began, I have kids who are growing up, and so I should have been at the point where everything would just move smoothly, and the decision I was about to make would throw everything back up for grabs. Marriage, relationships with my family members, my job, all of those things that I was afraid of losing when I was 15 were still the same things I was afraid of losing, because I was concerned that I would have no one, that I would make this choice and there would be nobody left in my life. And yet, despite that, I still needed, and maybe for me that speaks to how much I needed to move to this place of congruence for myself, was that everything that mattered to me, I was willing to risk losing, because I couldn't stand the idea of not being myself any longer. Because it tears you apart. I mean, it tears you apart to be fake, to be somebody that everybody else wants you to be, to put on this story for everybody. I did my work around how I do this, how I deal with my own issues, got myself ready, and then started moving out into the world more and more as myself. And then the last hurdle was my job, and it was more difficult to shift. There was a greater sense. I was more locked into who I was and how I looked when I was living on the other side of the aisle. And so it was really tough for me to separate that, which is part of the whole clown thing, that I didn't look like myself, I was faking something. There is, of course, the piece of, God, I would have given anything to have done puberty blockers and started hormones and have never gone through electrolysis. I love the lady who does my electrolysis. She is incredible. She is the nicest human being in the universe. And yet, for me, that's the piece. All of us have different pieces and different things, but that still having any facial hair, I just want to tear it off my face. That is the place where it's like I just want to rip it. If I could find a way to get my fingernails underneath it and just tear it off, I would tear it off. Despite the fact that the count is ridiculously lower than it ever was, but the fact that there is still this little bit there reminds me of a place where I never belonged. I had a conversation at one point with my spouse where she had asked if I could stay in a gender fluid position. And she was just asking to ask. And she wasn't being mean or pushy or anything else. It was just, is there a possibility that you can do this? And at the time that she'd said it to me, I said, give me a day to think about it. And we were having lunch at the time. And I don't know if I got past another bite, and I just stopped and I said, okay, I'm lying to you. If I'm telling you, give me a day, I said, I'm just creating expectations. And I can't do it. I can't move back and forth. That is not where I am. And which meant that I was risking a relationship that I really wanted. So I shifted. I transitioned. I transitioned with my firm several years ago. It's been 9 years. And there have been losses. There have been a lot of losses. And yet, I wouldn't change the decision. I want to change the decision. I can't conceive of living my life out in a way that I finally get to be me. I finally get to express who I am, to live as myself.
When we were in the kitchen of my old house, that was the first time I was in the kitchen of my old house, and I made sense in that space. I actually made sense. Everything fell together. And I think those are the things that there is not a morning that I get up where I don't thank God. Every morning that I have this opportunity to finally feel whole. And it doesn't mean like my whole life is seashells and balloons or anything else, but I feel whole, and I didn't know that I would ever have that opportunity, that it would ever be there for me. And to experience the world as a woman that I've always been, to be able to choose every day what to wear in a way that's congruent with me and how I'm feeling that day and where I'm going to be that day, but it's always an expression of me within that context. It is for all of the levels of loss that I've experienced, I would do it all over again to get to this space. I would do it all over again.